The Manitowoc MLC650 made its debut at the Conexpo exhibition in 2014. It's a high-capacity crane nominally in the 650-ton class, and a feature of it is the moving variable position counterweight. This model of it has been made by Towsleys in China, and it's been engineered by Weiss Brothers. It is delivered in a big outer shipping carton, and inside that is the Manitowoc branded box. With a box this size and weight, you really need a crane to handle it. But not to worry, the Cranes Etc. team is made up of beefy tough guys. There are 3 big trays of parts, and they're all nicely wrapped in soft paper. That's the top tray, so let's have a quick look at the middle tray. And under that is the heavily loaded bottom tray. So there's a lot of assembly to do, and in this video we'll just concentrate on the assembly. Thankfully there's a high quality manual included, and that has a full itemised parts list. And there are step-by-step instructions which are largely pictorial. It shows you almost everything, and there's just a couple of parts missed. And there are no reeving diagrams for the hooks. But overall it's very good, and it only concentrates on the one configuration of the model, using up all of the parts. Cranes Etc. has made over 1,000 reviews and reports, so if you like what we do, please support us and help us continue by making a pledge via Patreon. The link is on the screen and in the video description, and in return for your support you can get various rewards including news, early access, discounts and other benefits, and know that your support will keep us going. Let's get building, and a nice touch to start with is that all of the smaller parts, such as screws, come in their own individually labelled bags, so that makes it easier. We begin by mounting the car body onto the frame that spans between the tracks, and that drops easily into place. But we need to secure it in position, and if we look underneath there's a hole for a screw. Now with any parts on a model like this, it's best to tap the screw in first before mounting the parts and assembling it. And that just makes life easier if access is difficult to a part. In this case, if the screw is not magnetic, there's a little trick we can use and apply a bit of plastic putty to the screw head. Then we can push the screwdriver into the plastic putty. That means we don't have to employ a 1:50 scale mechanic to get inside and fit the screw. And you can feel smug as you imagine everyone else struggling to fit it. So once the screw's in, we need to tighten it up. And it's important to check that the car body rotates properly without any rocking. Here comes the next part, and it's the rotating bed assembly, and it's still got some packaging which we need to remove later. To make things easier, the 4 fixing screws have been partially screwed in before mounting the assembly, and then as long as the holes are carefully lined up, we can drive in the screws. Next we're onto the moving counterweight mechanism, and we start by fixing the small actuator assembly to the beam assembly, and that's fixed in place by some mildly awkward plastic pins. So here we have the so-called VPC Max assembled, and it's a sliding part which fixes onto a rail on the rotating bed assembly. It gets pushed all the way in and then it hooks on to stop the end drooping down. The counterweights will need to rest on something, and here it is, it's the counterweight tray assembly. And that's also a sliding part, and again it hooks in onto a rail. Let's take a break from the weighty matters of the counterweight and look at something that's not in the manual. There are 4 jacks on the body which would be used for self-assembly, and to complete the model the pistons with the pads on the end get pushed into the jackets. Once that's done you can stop them waving about because there are some small pins that you can insert into the ram jackets to hold them in place. These pins are small, and it's one of the first bits of micro-assembly that we have to do. It's back to the heavy end of things, and we need to put a big stabiliser pad that hangs off the end. And again that's fixed into place with some slightly tricky to fit plastic bolts. Let's now add a bit of detail, and that includes a set of steps and a plate that fits on either side, and they just neatly drop into place. Okay then, back to more weighty matters. Let's add a very small pin on both sides of the counterweight mechanism, and then we can add the counterweight boxes themselves. They are all separate pieces and they just stack on the counterweight tray. But heavy though they are, they need to be strapped together to stop them toppling over. And the model includes sets of chains to do this. You can't really fix them tightly, so perhaps it's more for show. And here the hook end of the chain is hooked into the other end, and then it's all just hung over the lifting tabs on the counterweight boxes. And that all makes for a nice enough looking detail. Now it's time to get onto the big stuff, and that's the boom, the mast, and the luffing jib. They all come as separate pieces, just like the real crane, and you have to bolt them all together. To do this, there are tiny black nuts and bolts, and it's best to get a tin to put them all in when you start your work. Tools are also provided to help you do the task, and one piece takes a nut that you can just put into the end. And the other tool is a bolt holder. You feed the bolt in and it's tight enough that it doesn't just drop out. After that you can guess the rest. You put in the bolt, you add the nut and tighten it up, but there's no need to over tighten it. Then you just repeat the operation many times. And here we are, we've pre-assembled the big main boom, and it is big. Actually it's very big. And then we can follow that with the mast, which is not quite so big. And lastly we have the luffing jib, which is quite big. It's all very well, but where are you going to drink your coffee? And for that you need a cab, and it's time to fit that on the model. It comes as a separate part, and it's a good idea to line up the holes using a screwdriver before you try to insert the pin. And there is the steel pin ready to be pushed down and home. There is also a secondary pin to insert, and for that we fold out the small bracket, line it up, and then drop the pin in. And there we have it done. So now we move on to the big stuff, and we start by adding on the mast. Once it's more or less in position, again it's good to line up the holes using a drift or screwdriver, and then it's secured on both sides using a large steel pin. One good thing on the model is that the live mast comes ready reeved, but the spacer that's used to keep the lines taut prevents the backstops of the mast being seated, so we'll have to do a temporary bodge job and use an old screwdriver. We'll then press on and attach the main boom, and again that's an easy fit with large steel pins to secure it in place. The next bit of assembly is to attach the various straps. Fortunately these do come in assembled lengths, so there's not a bazillion nuts and bolts to do up. They are made of ductile metal, so they will bend easily, so you have to be a little bit careful how you handle them. And don't force anything. If the connections are too tight, just loosen them off a bit to straighten out the straps. After that you need to follow the manual closely to get the right straps in the right place and to get the right end at the right end. We now need to go in for some careful manoeuvring to get the live mast attached to the back mast. And we'll start by carefully removing the packaging from the reeved lines. Let's move the back mast forwards temporarily, and then we come to the tricky part, which is moving that spacer towards the back. And here we fast forward to the spacer moved, and now we can lower the mast so that the backstops get seated properly. With that done, we can then attach the hanging straps from the mast, and we'll attach the first pair to the VPC beam assembly. We now need to attach the second pair to the live mast, and to do that we've got to raise the live mast up a bit, and that's a little bit tricky. The trick is to keep the lines taut whilst you unspool the drums, and keep it that way whilst you attach the straps and then remove the spacer. With that done we can now move on to everybody's favourite, and that's the reeving operations. To start with we'll take some line off of the winch on the back mast, and run it up over the top so we can start the reeving of the boom luffing gear. This is probably most easily done up in the air, so to facilitate that, we put in a temporary arrangement of tying off the boom and the mast. So that's held fixed in place so we can start the reeving of the luffing gear, and much fun awaits us. Now it's done, and we also used a second temporary support on the luffing bridle. And with the work done, the temporary supports can be removed. So the last major assembly to do is to attach the luffing jib, and that's quite easy to do on this model. It drops into place so there can be a screwed connection at the pivot point, but also helpfully there are a couple of ratchet bars on the backstops, and you can press those into the top of the boom, which makes the luffing jib self-supporting. And that's a minor godsend because it enables the luffing jib to be self-supporting whilst we reeve it up. And here we go again, happily running the rope through the pulleys. Bam! It's popped out again. Damn. Oh God, I can't believe it. I've done it. After a bit of work, the reeving is done and a luffing jib is supported. There's still a bit more rope work to do, and here we've hung the heavy hook block from the main boom. And that's quite an easy hook to reeve up. And from the luffing jib we've hung a smaller hook block, which was actually a little bit more fiddly to do. We're near the end of the assembly now, so there's one or two things to attend to. And firstly, we need to detach pins and free up the lower end of the live mast. And by winding in on the winch drums, you can see that it's opening up. The final things to do are adding some detail. And we'll start by adding some covers to the holes in the bodywork. And those holes are there to allow you to operate the live mast winches. The covers are plastic and they clip into place. Finally, there's an array of walkways and platforms that have to be fitted on both sides of the crane. And these press in and they're a decent fit, with only one or two being slightly loose. And that's it, the assembly is complete, and we can stand back and look at our model. This is a big crane, so let's do a dim check. And to the top of the main boom it's about 55 inches or 140 centimetres. And here to the top of the luffing jib it's around 80 inches or 2 metres. And the jib's not even pulled back to its highest position. So that completes the assembly. For the detail, features and overall rating, see part 2 of this video series.